We're going to get started. I'm just going to just continue with Hebrews 11 as we talked about faith and our message for today. You might have seen this is our message series. This is our third out of our 4-part message series. So next week will be our last one. I'm very excited to end with a bang, but we are studying Hebrews 11 and we're learning and talking about what is faith and how do we have faith, how do we grow in our faith, and how do we live out our faith. So a lot in our 4-part series about faith. We've talked about Abraham last week. Today we are now going to turn our attention to another titan of the faith that is listed in Hebrews 11. It is Moses. It is Moses. And Moses has a lot of titles, all right? If everybody knows Moses, basically. He's a really popular dude, all right? If you go to heaven, very, very popular guy. Everyone's going to probably say hello to him. He is called, the great deliverer because he brought the Jews out of Egypt and freed them, right? He's also called the great lawgiver because the 10 Commandments comes from Moses. He's also the great historian because the first 5 books of the Bible, called the Pentateuch, from Genesis all the way to Deuteronomy, is actually written by or attested to Moses as the author of these books. Also, Moses, if you remember from our series as we studied the Sermon on the Mount, he's known as the meekest man in the world. Like, how cool is that? To be the most humble yet most powerful man in the world. So Moses, so popular that even Disney named an entire movie after him, right? The Prince of Egypt. So, very popular guy. But when we're studying Hebrews 11, and when the author of Hebrews talk about Moses, do you know that the author of Hebrews did not mention any of that? None of that mattered to the Hebrew writer. Instead, the author of the book of Hebrews focused on one trait of Moses and highlights that trait and elevates it and say, this is what Moses' faith boils down to. Would you want to know what that is? That is our message for today. It is a faith to endure. And that is what the Hebrew writers talk about. In verse 27 in the Bible text that we are going to read today, this is what the writer writes about Moses. By faith, he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. Out of everything that the Hebrew writer could have talked about, the Hebrew writer focuses on Moses' endurance. And that's his core and the summary of his faith. And in the Greek word, the word endure means to steadfast. It's 2 words, it's sort of like a combo word, and it means to stand powerfully, right? It's like hyper stand, technically. And the imagery is, if you imagine that there's a beautiful river, a river flowing really fast, and you're standing in that river. You're standing there, and the river is running, and you're just standing, and you're holding your ground. And as the torrent is coming, you are standing firm. That is the definition of endurance. Steadfast. Hyper stand. Powerfully standing. And that is what Moses' faith is highlighted for. That is what we're going to talk about today. How are we going to have a faith that endures? All right? How are we going to have a faith that endures the test of time, that endures the current of all kinds of stuff coming at us and still stand firm? So if you have your Bible with you, and I sure hope you do by now, or go on the internet somewhere, please turn to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 23. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 23. I'm going to read it to you. We're going to go from verse 23 to 29. That is going to be our Bible text for today. I hope you have it. I stalled some time already. Here we go. Hebrews 11, 23 to 29 goes, by faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents, because they saw that the child was beautiful and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. By faith, he kept the Passover and sprinkled the blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch them. By faith, the people crossed the Red Sea as on dry land, but the Egyptians, when they were attempted to do the same, were drowned. This, my friends and my brothers and sisters, is the word of the Lord. Amen. Amen. All right. So that is our text for today. And we're going to talk about five trials that Moses' faith had to endure, according to this text. 5 things Moses' faith had to endure. And then we're going to wrap it up by talking about how. How does he have that kind of faith to endure those 5 things? Are you with me? Are you ready? 5 things ready that Moses will endure with his faith. Number 1, Moses had a faith to endure opposition and hostility. So if you're taking notes right now, opposition and hostility. Verse 23 reads, by faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents, because they saw that the child was beautiful, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. All right, we're going to take a step back. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background story. You're going to have to be very familiar with Exodus to know what's going on. So every time I give you a verse, I'm going to give you the story. If you know Exodus, that is fantastic. If you don't, I encourage you to read the book of Exodus. If you were to read the book of Exodus right now, the very, very first chapter begins with Pharaoh, which is the king of Egypt, the most powerful man at the time, issuing a command, an edict. And the edict was every single male baby Jewish boy is to be killed. They were supposed to be thrown into the Nile River right after birth. You see, historically what had happened was, towards the end of the book of Genesis, Joseph saved the Egyptians' life from a famine, right? So Joseph, who was a Jew, became the second most powerful person in all of Egypt, all right? And then through Joseph's influence, more and more and more Jewish people moved into Egypt. And then they started making babies, they started growing, they started starting businesses, and so they're flourishing and they're growing. So from generation to generation to generation, the Jewish people are growing in Egypt. Well, as time goes on, after many generations, the Egyptians clearly forgot about Joseph. This has been like many hundreds of years now at this point. Like Joseph, what's that got to do with us? And the Jewish people who are living in Egypt at the time end up being enslaved, and they were very, very cheap labor for the Egyptians to build pyramids and whatever that they were trying to build. And so Pharaoh at the time became really, really paranoid because he has a nation that he's trying to run, but this huge population of people that he has no control over and a huge population of labor. So out of his paranoia and fear, thinking that they might rebel, he decided to do some birth control, some population control. And the way that he decided to do it was he's going to say, okay, I'm going to kill every single male baby out there and just keep the female. Because the females kind of follow the husband, so whatever. But the guys, going to kill all of them. Moses was born during that time. So during Moses' time, Moses and his family, all the Jewish people, they were experiencing a lot of opposition and hostility because they were slaves to the Egyptians. And Moses was going to be one of those babies that's going to be thrown into the Nile. Here's where it comes to our text. Because through Moses' parents' faith, right, it says that they were not afraid of Pharaoh's edict. They decided to hide him for 3 months instead. Think about how crazy and how hard that is. Think about how difficult it would be to hide a baby for 3 months in Egypt. Not like they have soundproof houses or anything like that. I know this because if I try to hide Nathan for even a little bit, oh my goodness, he could randomly scream from the top of his head for no random reason. And then the guards would come and just grab him. So that's a lot of work. It's really, really scary, right? And this is just a thought for us, for you and I, for the people who are listening, brothers and sisters, okay? The question then is, if your boss or some authority figure comes and tells you to do something against your faith, how would you respond? Even if you know that you will get in big, big trouble if you don't obey, how would you respond? Here's a quick side point that's kind of related. You know, Moses' faith journey and the man he became eventually, it all started with his parents' faith to endure opposition and hostility. That's why the opening verse of 23 is actually talking about Moses' parents' faith. And I just want to add a quick side note to all the parents out there that is listening, right? Or if you are going to be a future parent down the line. This is important. Your faith is the beginning of your children's faith journey. Not the church, not their Christian friends, not their Bible teacher, right? It is your faith and how you live it out on a day-to-day basis that's going to influence and begin your children's faith journey. Moses' parents' faith paved the way for him to endure opposition and hostility down the line. So that's one aspect of their faith to endure. Okay. Number two, Moses' faith had to endure the temptation to pick the easy way out, the easy route. A faith to endure the temptation to pick the easy way out. Check out verse 14 with me right here. Verse 14 says, "By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin." So the story continues. After 3 months of hiding, Moses' parents could not hide him any longer. So what did they do? They put him in a basket and they decided to put him into the Nile River and send him off, and they're praying to God. They're hoping like, okay, hopefully God will save him somehow. What ends up happening is baby Moses floats down the river, and he ends up being picked up and found by, who do you know? The princess of Egypt. So she has a compassionate heart. She finds this baby. She knows it's a Hebrew baby. She picks him up from the water. She adopts him. She ends up hiring Moses' real mom to be his nanny. So ironically, Moses was raised by his real mom, but as a nanny. All right? But he's adopted into the royal family. And the princess named Moses because his name means to be drawn up from the water. That's what Moses means, to be drawn up from the water. A lot of the people, the way that they name people back then, it's very, they just name according to whatever it is. All right. So, pop quiz. Just say the answer to somebody next to you if you know the answer, all right? If Moses was adopted by the princess of Egypt, who is Pharaoh to Moses? I think I hear some answers out there. Hopefully you said some answers. Yeah. If you said Pharaoh is Moses' grandfather, you are absolutely correct. So good job. Yeah. Moses becomes the grandson of the most powerful man in all of Egypt. In fact, Egypt at that time was one of the most powerful nations in all of Mesopotamia, that whole region during that time. So instead of growing up like a Jewish slave, Moses grows up to be Kind of like that Disney movie, right? The Prince of Egypt. But the problem is, one day, as Moses is just walking around, okay, one day, he had to decide between his Egyptian upbringing of royalty or his Jewish roots. And so one day, that choice happened, and he had to make that choice. As he's kind of walking around, doing his typical Moses stuff, he sees an Egyptian beating up on a Jewish slave. Beating him up. Moses had a choice at that moment. He either could have ignored it, or he could have done something about it. And he ends up making a choice that impacted his life moving forward. He went to break up the fight, and he killed the Egyptian instead to save that Jewish person. Because of that, Moses ends up having to run away from Egypt because, Pharaoh is going to find out that Moses just killed an Egyptian. So Moses runs away and goes to the desert, in the Midianite desert. Question though, what could have Moses done differently after he killed the Egyptian? Like, what could he have done differently? Well, one thing, you know what he could have done? Remember, Pharaoh is Moses' grandfather. Okay, Moses is part of the royal family at this moment. Moses could have easily gone to grandfather Pharaoh, right? And go, I'm so sorry, granddaddy Pharaoh. Like, I did something really, really stupid. I kind of killed this commoner Egyptian for this Jewish slave. I'm so sorry. Can you please forgive me? I didn't mean it. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Moses could have done that. And you know what Pharaoh could have done? Pharaoh could have been like, oh, what? Did you say you just killed a commoner Egyptian? Shh. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I can cover that up. I can wipe that up. I'm the most powerful man in all of Egypt. I rule with an iron fist. What's the life of a commoner, right, compared to you, Prince of Egypt? So Moses could have done that. Moses could have gone up and been like, I'm so sorry, granddaddy. And Pharaoh, I bet, would have forgiven him. And then he would have gone scot-free. But instead, what did Moses do? Moses chose to do the right and hard thing instead of the easy thing. He did the right and hard thing instead of the easy thing. When you and I, when we are faced with a difficult choice, do we have the faith to choose the right and hard thing? Or do we always end up choosing the easy way out? Just think about how you live your life and the choices you make. Do you make the right and hard thing, or do you do the easy thing? It's hard. It is a hard thing to study for a test, to do all your homework, and to cram all night to prepare for the tests. It is a very easy thing to just Google answers or cheat or just accept a D and go, whatever. It is a hard thing to swallow our pride and to admit we are wrong. It is very easy to defend ourselves and ignore and make excuses why it's not our fault. It is a very, very hard thing to say no to a relationship because it's not God honoring. It is a very easy thing to say, what's the big deal? You see, the hard things in life, many, many times, are the right things to do. The question is, do we have the faith to endure the temptation, to choose the easy way out? Moses' faith to endure the temptation, to choose the easy way out, and instead to do the right and hard thing, that choice was not easy. But through his faith of choosing the right and hard thing, it had a major influence from generation to generation to generation down the road. All of the Jewish people ends up getting freed from Egypt. The faith to endure the temptations to choose the easy way out. Third, Moses had the faith to endure disapproval. Verse 27. By faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. So, back to the story. After Moses made the really hard choice to be part of God's people instead of the Egyptian royalty, Moses has to run to the desert and escapes in the desert for 40 years with the disapproval and anger of Pharaoh, his grandfather. Because remember, he could have gone and said, sorry, granddaddy Pharaoh, sorry, mommy princess, please forgive me, and I'm sure they would forgive him. But he had to make that right choice, and he had to accept their disapproval. Think about this. Think about what Moses must be thinking through his mind here. Pharaoh and the princess raised him up, gave him food, gave him an education, paid for all his clothing, put him in the best room in all of the palace. He was well loved with maids and servants. The princess, his mom, saved his life, hired his mom to raise him up. He owes a lot to Pharaoh and princess. Moses owed a lot to the Egyptian royal family, if you think about it. And I bet they had really, really high expectations of him, for them to treat him in such a way. But Moses had to disappoint them. He had to accept the disapproval of people whom he owes some stuff to because of his faith. And don't get me wrong, if you want to grow in your faith, there will be times that you will have to choose between a boss's approval, a parent's approval, your friend's approval, and you would have to disappoint them because of your faith, because you want to do the right and hard thing, because you want to honor God, because you want to let people know that you are a Christian and you live by what you say. Many, many years ago, I had to do the same with my parents. My family grew up in a non-Christian household, as many of you know. My parents are Buddhists. My entire family members, majority of them at the time, non-Christian and Buddhist. And there would be moments where I would have to, join them for lunch, join them in dinner, do different stuff, and they would bow down to the ancestor. They would do these things that are idol worship. And I would stand there and I would say, I cannot do this. Even for my wedding, for Elaine and our wedding, there is this whole tea ceremony thing to honor your ancestors and parents and family and stuff. And because we did not want to bow down to ancestors or worship ancestors, we had to disappoint our parents, and we said, no, we're not going to do that. Were they angry at us? Yes. Were they disappointed? Yes. Did they feel like we owe so much to them? What's the big deal? I'm sure they did. Did we have to disappoint them and receive their disapproval? Yes, we did. But we had to do it because we had to choose God and our faith over their approval. There's going to be a point in time for all of your faith where your faith is going to bump heads with people's approval. And I pray that you will have the faith to endure people's disapproval because of your faith. Whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's at school, right? When all your friends are picking on and bullying this boy or this girl on social media, sometimes you have to say no. As a Christian, I'm not going to do that. And your friends, you might receive the disapproval of your friends. Sometimes you're at work and people are saying, hey, let's just cut the corners a little bit. Let's just cheat our tax a little bit. Let's just do this a little bit. And maybe you really like this coworker. Maybe it's your manager. Sometimes you have to say, no, I can't do that because of my faith. And you will receive their disapproval. Moses had to receive the disapproval of somebody who raised him up, fed him, gave him an education for his faith. That's a strong, strong faith to endure. Fourth, we're almost done. Fourth, Moses had a faith to endure doubts. Verse 28. By faith he kept the Passover and sprinkled the blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch them. Going back to the story now, Moses had run away from Egypt, stayed there for 40 years. God calls him back. This is the scene that everybody knows about. This is the scene where Moses is duking it out with Pharaoh of Egypt. This is the scene where you hear, let my people go. Right? That's the scene. This is the scene with the 10 plagues that God sends to Egypt to teach Pharaoh a lesson. And one of these days, we're going to go through a message series on Exodus. But this is the scene right now. Moses had come back after 40 years. He's ready to duke it out with Pharaoh. And this is referring to the final plague, the 10th plague of that whole series. This is the plague that God says, Moses, this is going to be the final one. Because Pharaoh killed the sons of the Jews back in the early days, I'm going to kill every single firstborn in all of Egypt. Young or old. If they're the firstborn, they get killed. Unless they paint their doorposts with blood from a lamb. So they had to paint the blood posts. And if that house has that blood post, then when the reaper and the destroyer comes and he sees that red door stop, he will pass over it. That's why it's called the Passover. It is the day where people's life are passed over. They don't get killed. But the ones without the household, without the red on their doorposts, the firstborn dies. And of course, Pharaoh's firstborn ends up dying during this scene. Think about what Moses has to be going through when God told him to do this. Because remember, there is no precedent. This is the first time ever that God is telling somebody to do something like this. There is no other like it. And God basically says, take this hyssop branch, just dip it with some red lamb blood, and just do this, and you'll be safe. Imagine what Moses is thinking. Moses is thinking like, seriously, God? Like, really? Is that really gonna save people's life? And sometimes for you and I think that's our attitude that we have when we read the Bible. Whenever we hear something from the Word of God, we begin to have doubts. We go, really? Is that it? That's all I need to do? Really? Just forgive? Really? Just love my enemies and pray for them? Really? Just read the Bible and my faith will grow? Really? Will this really work? And here is Moses' faith. He has all these doubts. He has tons of doubts. But nonetheless, he obeyed. And he did what God asked him to do. That was the fourth thing. Fifth and last thing that Moses' faith had to endure. Moses' faith had to endure obstacles. Lots of obstacles. Final verse, verse 29. By faith, the people crossed the Red Sea as on dry land, but the Egyptians, when they were attempted to do the same, were drowned. Back to the story. Passover happens. Pharaoh's firstborn son gets killed. Pharaoh goes, okay, fine. Let your people go. In fact, get the heck out of my country. Go, 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 go. Take some silver. Take some gold. Just get out of my country. So Pharaoh kicks all the Jews out of Egypt, actually. And so the Jews goes, okay. So they start packing. They start heading towards the desert, leaving Egypt. And on their way, Pharaoh's heart begins to harden. Pharaoh begins to think. He goes, oh my goodness, what did I just do? I just gave away my entire cheap labor force. I just gave away like a lot of income. Oh my goodness, what did I just do? So Pharaoh has this change of heart. He goes, I regret doing this. So what does he do instead? Pharaoh goes, he assembles an army, the most powerful army at the time. And he goes, chase after Moses and the Jews and bring them back. And so that's that scene where the Egyptian army is going after the Jewish people who are walking. And so for the Jewish people, in front of them is the Red Sea. Behind them is the most powerful army in all of Mesopotamia during that time in the Middle East. Talk about being stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? They got tons of obstacles at this point. They're like stuck right in between. But what are we told? We are told that by faith, the people crossed the Red Sea. No obstacles, okay? Red Sea, whatever, split open, let's just go, right? And by the way, there's a lot of sort of science and history behind the Red Sea, the parting of the Red Sea with the wind that goes through and all that stuff that you can look up on your own, all right? I'm not going to talk about that, but we're told that these Jewish people did not let any obstacles stop them. By faith, they crossed the Red Sea. Notice that the Egyptians tried to cross the Red Sea also, but they were drowned. The army was brave. It is not about bravery, okay? It is not about how courageous you are. The Egyptians were really, really brave and courageous. However, it is not what courage that delivers them and brings them across the Red Sea. It is not courage that overcomes obstacles. It is their faith that overcomes obstacles. Any obstacle. And we are all going to run into obstacles in our life. Especially as we try to honor and obey God. We want to read the Bible, but I can't find the time. That's an obstacle. We want to do our devotion in the morning, but I can't wake up in time. That's another obstacle. We want to pray, but now I get so sleepy, right? There's lots of obstacles whenever you try to obey God. There's always going to be obstacles when you try to exercise your faith. Let's just be clear. Obedience to God, following God, living your life out according to the Bible, there will be tons of obstacles. It's not going to be easy. So just kind of get that easy idea out of your mind now and just anticipate obstacles and be prepared to endure the obstacles. No matter what the obstacles, I pray that we will have the faith to endure it and press on instead of just giving up. Right? I can't read the Bible today. I can't find time. Set another schedule. Try again. It's okay. Just because this time doesn't succeed, each time you try, you do get better. So if you had given up, if you had made a commitment like I should read the Bible more, I should pray more, I should do the devotion, and you haven't been doing it, that's okay. Those are obstacles. Try again. Have a faith to endure. Don't just go, I give up, I tried, not going to work. Try again. All right? So we talked about 5 things. 5 things about Moses' faith that he had to endure. If you are taking notes, here's all 5 for you right now. Moses' faith had to endure opposition and hostility. Moses' faith had to endure temptation. Moses' faith had to endure disapproval. Moses' faith had to endure doubts. And Moses' faith had to endure obstacles. But the question for you and I, which I never answered, is how do we have the faith to endure all these things? How can we grow in our faith? So, this text gives us two answers. This is what Moses did. So I'm going to give you the how to endure these 5 things in your life right now. Number 1, if you want to have a faith that can endure to overcome all of these situations, you need to evaluate the value of the reward. What do I mean by that? Verse 26. Moses considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. The key here is Moses considered. In other words, he thought deeply and hard about it. He knows the value, he knows the wealth of Egypt and all of its treasures. I think he calculated it. Oh my goodness, Egypt and all the wealth that I could inherit, billions of dollars. And he knows what that is worth. But Moses also knows the value of what it means to be God's people. And the text tells us that Moses chose the reward. He was looking forward to the reward to be part of God's people as greater than the treasures of Egypt. Jesus says the exact same thing in Matthew 16:26. I don't have the Bible verse with you here, but Jesus, teaching all his disciples, says this: "For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul?" Have we considered our faith and the value of our faith? Have we considered the value of our soul? Do we see that the value of our soul is far greater than any beauty or money can buy in this world? And if that question doesn't move you to say, yes, then maybe, just maybe, we don't fully comprehend the value of our soul for all eternity. And it's going to take a lot of learning. It's going to take some discipline to appreciate the value of something. Let me give you a lesson. Let me give you a life lesson for anybody who's thinking about getting married. So listen carefully, okay? This is a very precious lesson I'm about to teach you right now. And this is about, and I'm going to teach you a lesson on how to shop for a diamond ring. I'm going to give you my lesson, okay? How to shop for a diamond ring. So, when I was thinking about proposing to Elaine many years ago, I went into a jewelry store because I wanted to, I want to propose with the whole on my knee, like, will you marry me kind of thing. So I went into this jewelry store, right, trying to be cool. And I walked up to the lady on the counter, and I said, "Excuse me, ma'am, I would like a really big ring." So I take out my wallet, I throw down like whatever $50 I have. And by the way, I'm not telling you the real number, but just to say I threw down $50, and I said, "All right, give me the biggest ring I can buy. The biggest diamond. Whoa, whatever it is, give it to me." All right? But I was a pretty broke graduate student, all right? And then the storekeeper looks at me, and she goes, "Excuse me, young man, I don't think you want the biggest diamond." And I go, "What?" Like she says, yeah, I don't think you want the biggest diamond. And then she explains to me, she starts to educate me about how diamonds work. So apparently, there are 4 C's when you look for a diamond. There are 4 things you look for. You look for the color, you look for the clarity, you look for the cut, and then you look for the carat, which is the size. And she goes, you know, carat is not everything. A big diamond could be worth a lot less than this little tiny diamond because of the color and clarity and cut. That's why I got Elaine a little tiny diamond. Just kidding. I try my best, whatever the good balance, okay? But apparently, size is not everything when it comes to diamond. Carat is not about everything. There's other values to it too. And so if you don't know the value of diamonds and you have no experience about it, then you're just going to think, ooh, big diamond is worth a lot. And you're going to miss the true treasure because you don't know what is truly valuable and what is not valuable. Same thing with our Christian faith. Same thing the way that we evaluate things. Moses knew. Moses thought about it. And what gave him the faith to endure those 5 situations that I just mentioned is this fact, that Moses knew that the reproach of Christ is greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt. He kept his eyes on the prize. He knew what was truly valuable. He knew what was going to pay off. He knew that eternity is worth a lot more than things that are just going to disappear, no matter how bling bling it looks. All right. This world, my friend, mixes things around. The values of this world is all jumbled up. We grow up in a world like somebody went into a grocery store, or they went into like a clothing store and they rearrange all the price tags. So things that are worth like $1,000, right? Like let's say this Louis Vuitton. I heard LV is like doing amazing, right? And so let's say somebody goes, ooh, LV, and they move the LV price tag and they move it to like, I don't know, like Gap, gunk. And then they move a Gap price tag over to the LV side, $5. Okay? You go into the store and you go, that thing is worth $1,000. It's from Gap. Must be really valuable. I'm going to buy it. And then you're going to miss out on the true treasure, right? And that's the point. Our world's values have been all rearranged and mixed up in all sorts of ways. Things that are not that important gets placed on top. Things that are really important get placed on the bottom. Think about it. Just think about this. At the end of your life, at the end of my life, in fact, research has shown this, at the end of everyone's life, okay, everybody says that the one thing they want to do or see before they die, they want to see their loved ones. They want to see their family members. They want to see the people whom they've impacted. Nobody goes, can I take a look at my bank account one last time? Can I take a look at my diplomas one last time? Can I look at the followings I have on social media one last time? Nobody does that. Nobody. Can I go to work one last time? Nobody does that. Yet, how much time do you prioritize your loved ones, your family, and relationship compared to pursuing money and work and diploma and all these other things? How much time do you spend on social media, on your iPhone, on your video games, more so than your loved ones, your friends, and relationships? Our values are all mixed up and we don't even know it. And it is time to wake up and recognize the value of what you have and give the appropriate time and attention to things that are worth it. And scale back on things that are not. Moses knew that the reproach of Christ was greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt. That's what gave him the faith to overcome those 5 situations. And lastly, there's one other thing Moses knew. This is the second how. Moses knew that to endure, he had to look to Jesus. I don't have that verse, but the verse 27, that's sort of in the black, that is not well highlighted, I apologize, says this: by faith, look at the black part, okay? By faith, he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. Moses saw a glimpse of the invisible God. He saw God in a burning bush speaking to him. And while Moses saw the invisible God, basically didn't see him at all, he didn't have any precedent to work with. You and I and all Christians in this point in time have the privilege and the honor to see the visible God. We get to see Jesus in his glory and what he does on the cross. We should be having way more faith than Moses and the people during those times, because we get to see God. We know what God has done. We see what Jesus did on the cross. Moses and everybody before us did not get that privilege. How can we have faith? We need to look to Jesus. We need to focus on Jesus. We need to make much of Jesus. That's going to be my next message and the final message next week when we have a combined service, where we are going to look at and talk about. It turns out that every single hero of faith in Hebrews chapter 11, all of them looked to Jesus as the founder and perfecter of our faith. That's the verse. Because what Jesus did on the cross, because he showed us what is truly valuable, because he showed us that there is eternal life, we have to look to Jesus and make much of him, because he has given us the ultimate reward that far surpasses anything that the world can give. He's redeemed us of our souls for all eternity. Amen? So I pray that whatever obstacles you go through this week, consider the value of the reproach of Christ and look to Jesus.